Poor girl pretends to be ugly on a blind date, but the millionaire CEO proposed anyway. Are you trying to scare me away, or just test if I scare easy? Her spoon trembled in the coffee cup. Across from her sat Graham Everett, Seattle's most feared billionaire CEO, looking like he'd just stepped out of a GQ cover shoot and into her worst nightmare. Isla Munro blinked behind oversized thrift store glasses, a smudge of purple lipstick on her chin. Her hair was twisted into a chaos bun, and her dress looked like a rejected curtain from a community theater. She wasn't supposed to be here, and he wasn't supposed to stay. But he leaned in anyway, eyes calm, curious. "So," he said, "what's a girl like you doing in a disguise like that?" She opened her mouth. Nothing came out, because no matter how many walls she'd built, Isla hadn't prepared for the one thing her masks couldn't protect her from: a man who could actually see through them. Isla Munro had two rules. Never expect anything from rich people. Never show up anywhere without your dignity, or at least mascara. Tonight, she broke both. Her sister Lena had called it a social experiment and offered to pay for the Uber if Isla just showed up at this ridiculous blind date and made it awkward enough to get sent home in 10 minutes. A 5-star restaurant, a billionaire CEO, and her dressed like the warning label on a dry shampoo bottle. What no one told her was that he'd show up early. And look at her like she wasn't invisible. She'd been invisible for years. Ever since their dad passed and the flower shop barely held together. Ever since Mom stopped smiling. Ever since Isla gave up her own dreams to keep her family from falling apart. Most days, she didn't mind the hustle. Early mornings arranging lilies. Lunch breaks delivering tulips to people in love. Evenings spent counting pennies and telling her sister everything would be okay, even when it wasn't. So when Graham Everett, all jawline, cufflinks, and devastating calm, leaned across the table and said, "Tell me something true." She could have lied, should have. Instead, she whispered, "I hate flowers." He laughed, not politely, not condescendingly, but like she'd said something he actually didn't expect. And for the first time in years, she felt seen. Not for her kindness, not for her sacrifice, but for the chaos she usually hid. The waiter approached with menus. "Do you have anything that tastes like failure?" she asked flatly. "Ma'am?" "She'll have the passion fruit duck," Graham said calmly, not even glancing up. She stared at him. "I like surprises," he added, "and I don't scare easy." By the end of the appetizer, she'd told him she lived with 5 cats, lie, had a hobby of speed knitting sweaters for stray dogs, lie, and once tried to marry a barista in Vegas for a free latte. Technically true, but never finalized. He just smiled through it all. Worse, he looked like he enjoyed it. "3 dates," he said suddenly. She blinked. "What?" "3 dates. Show up however you want, say whatever you want, try your hardest to make me walk away. If I do, I'll give you $10,000. She stared at him like he'd lost his mind. "Why would you do that?" He folded his hands. "Because no one surprises me anymore. Until now." And before she could say no, he leaned back and asked, "What scares you more, letting someone in or the idea that no one ever might?" She didn't answer. Because in that moment, under that soft golden light, Isla realized she'd just stepped into something far more dangerous than a fake date. He'd stepped into a story she might not be able to lie her way out of. Chapter 1. Ugly on purpose. At should have walked out the moment he saw me. But instead he offered me a chair. Like I belonged. Seattle rain has a way of making even the most beautiful things feel gray. Isla stood outside the restaurant for a full 3 minutes, staring at her reflection in the dark window. Thick blue eyeliner, orange lipstick, earrings shaped like miniature waffles. The exact opposite of what Lena called date-worthy. She looked like the unfiltered version of someone's bad decision. That was the point. Inside sat Graham Everett, CEO of Lyric Tech, billionaire, cursed prince of the Pacific Northwest. And tonight, her target. All she had to do was sabotage the date, be unbearable, get rejected, walk away with a free meal, and a story. Instead, she walked straight into something that felt like a trap. The hostess blinked when Isla gave the name. "Mr. Everett is already seated," she said, recovering quickly. "Right this way." Her boots squeaked across the marble floor. Her cardigan had holes in both elbows. Her bangs were uneven, snipped in the dark with craft scissors. Every detail screamed, "Do not fall in love with me." And yet, when she approached the table, he stood up. Not just politely, intentionally. Like a man raised by someone who once taught him to respect women, no matter how absurdly dressed they might be. "Miss Monroe," he said with a quiet nod. She hesitated. "It's actually Miss Bubblewump." One eyebrow lifted. "Long story," she added, sliding into the leather seat. He was too calm, too observant. He didn't flinch when she told him her favorite food was expired cereal. He didn't blink when she said she once named a spider after her ex and then cried when it died. "I find death symbolic," she added. "I find you symbolic," he replied. She blinked. "Of what?" He smiled, the kind of smile that said he knew more than he let on. Something unexpected. By dessert, she'd run out of lies and started borrowing from her real life. "My mom taught me to make flower crowns, said if you wore one long enough, even your sadness would start to bloom." His eyes didn't leave hers. "Did it work?" She swallowed. "No, but it kept my hands busy." The silence stretched, then he said it. "You're not just pretending to be strange. You're hiding." That was the moment something shifted. She sat back, letting her fingers play with the edge of her sleeve. "Are you psychoanalyzing me, Mr. CEO?" "Just observing," he said. She tried to laugh, but it felt hollow. Because somehow, he wasn't wrong. "I don't usually do this," she admitted. "Wear chaos as armor?" he asked. "Go on blind dates," she corrected. "Or talk to men who smell like forest cologne and power." That earned a small smirk. "Would you rather I smelled like debt and insecurity?" She snorted. "Tempting." Then, just before the check came, he leaned forward. "I have a proposal." She raised an eyebrow. 3 dates. Come as whoever you want, be as ridiculous as you like. If I back out, you win. I'll give you $10,000. She stared. "And if I don't?" she asked slowly. "Then you owe me something." Like, your truth. Emotional peak. Word/act/decision. Your truth? It wasn't loud. It wasn't romantic, but it was terrifying. Because truth was the one thing she'd buried deeper than love. She didn't answer right away. Instead, she touched her glass, tracing the rim with one fingertip. "Why me?" she asked softly. "You could date literally anyone. Women who wear shoes that match. Women who know how to hold a conversation without sarcasm. I don't need another perfect face," he said. "I need someone who's not performing perfection." She stared at him. "What if you regret it?" "I already regret half my life. What's one more risk?" She signed the bill, shoved her ridiculous purse over her shoulder, then looked back at him and said, "Tomorrow, 8 p.m., there's a food truck near the pier that sells mac and cheese with jalapenos and regret." His smile grew just slightly. "I like regret," he said. On the walk home, Isla didn't notice the rain. Her sister was going to flip. Her mom would never approve, and her heart, well, it was already starting to beat in ways she didn't recognize. What if he wasn't the one being tested? What if she was the one still afraid to be seen? Chapter 2. Rain Between Us. The plan was simple. Be unbearable. But he showed up and smiled like he couldn't wait to see what I'd do next. It had rained all day in Seattle, that sharp, misty kind of rain that clings to your skin and seeps into your shoes. Isla Monroe stood beneath a crooked street lamp near the pier wearing an oversized poncho printed with cartoon frogs, bright red combat boots, and glitter on her cheeks. A hot pink umbrella dangled from her wrist like an afterthought. She looked like a parade float designed by an unsupervised child. Perfect. The goal was to be repellent, again. But when she spotted Graham Everett walking toward her, dark jeans, soft gray sweater, umbrella tucked under one arm, she felt something twist in her chest. He looked comfortable, effortless, like he didn't care if anyone saw him. She hated how much she wanted to be that way too. "You look like a whimsical crisis," he said, stopping in front of her. He gave a mock curtsy. I was aiming for chaotic frog deity. Success, he said with a slow smile. They ordered mac and cheese from the food truck Isla adored. Jalapenos, bacon crumbles, and something dangerously orange that probably wasn't real cheese. They sat on a bench under a leaky awning, each with a steaming paper bowl in hand. "So, Mr. CEO," Isla said, squinting at him, "you still think I'm worth 10 grand?" "I'm thinking of doubling it," he replied. She stared. "Why?" He looked at her, really looked. "Because every time you open your mouth, I forget I'm supposed to be bored." They ate in silence for a while, not the awkward kind, the kind that holds meaning. The kind that says, "I'm here, and for now, that's enough." Isla pointed toward the water, where rain tapped the surface in rhythmic chaos. "Sometimes I imagine the water's talking back." "What does it say?" She thought for a second. "It says, you're not as lost as you feel." He went still beside her, then quietly said, "That's exactly what it says." They walked slowly along the edge of the pier, sharing stories no one else would believe. She told him about the time she accidentally gave funeral roses to a wedding. He told her he once built an entire company pitch while drunk on NyQuil and heartbreak. "Was the heartbreak recent?" she asked. "No," he replied. "Still hurts?" He didn't answer, but she saw it in his hands, how they curled slightly, like holding on to something that wasn't there anymore. At one point, she started dancing, badly, to the distant sound of a saxophone across the street. "This is the ritual dance of my people," she announced, twirling with dramatic flair. "Let me guess," he said, "people who think raindrops are therapy." "Exactly." He laughed. She loved that laugh. Not because it was loud, but because it was rare. Like sunlight on a cloudy morning. You don't expect it, and when it shows up, it changes everything. They ended up in front of a closed bookstore, the kind with hand-painted signs and fairy lights in the window. They stood under the awning, closer than before. Neither spoke. The rain softened around them. Her breath fogged in the cold air. He tucked his hands into his pockets. "I Googled you," she said quietly. He didn't flinch. "Of course you did. You're not what I expected." His jaw tensed slightly. "What did you expect?" "Old, arrogant, empty. And what do you think now?" She hesitated. "I think you're a man who knows how to be alone, but maybe not how to be close." His eyes met hers, and for a heartbeat, they didn't look away. "That makes two of us," he said. He reached up, gently brushing rain from her cheek. Not with hunger, not with charm, but with reverence. The moment hung there, breathless, fragile. She stepped back. "I should go," she whispered. He nodded. "I'll walk you." "No," she said quickly. "If you walk me home, I might forget this is a bet." They stood in silence again. "I'm not trying to win," he said softly. She blinked. "Then what are—" Chapter 3. He knew all along. He called me Isla, but I never told him my name. The third date was supposed to be her masterpiece of madness. Isla wore a tutu over polka-dot leggings, mismatched gloves, a tiara with a missing gemstone, and a badge that read, "Ask me about my unstable childhood." If this didn't make him walk away, nothing would. But when she arrived at the dim-lit jazz cafe, Graham didn't laugh. He stood the moment she walked in, eyes locked on her, not with amusement this time, but something heavier, like someone looking at the truth he already knew. He pulled out her chair. "I was beginning to think you'd cancel. I was beginning to hope you'd block my number," she replied, flashing an overacted smile. He didn't return it. Instead, he said softly, "Isla." She froze mid-sit. Her heart dropped like a stone into her stomach. "What did you call me?" He tilted his head, studying her the way he did when she pretended not to feel anything. "Isla Monroe," he said again. "Your real name." Her throat tightened. "I never told you that." "I know." Silence filled the space between them like fog. Heavy. Cold. She stood abruptly. "You've been looking into me?" No, he said, not recently. Then how do you know who I am? He leaned back, exhaled slowly. Because I've seen you before. Flashback. 2 months ago? A rain-soaked day near a corner flower shop in Capitol Hill. A man in a black coat stood across the street, watching a woman hand a bouquet to an elderly stranger, refusing payment. You deserve something beautiful today, she'd said. You don't need to pay for that. She'd laughed as the man walked away, cradling sunflowers like hope. She had no idea anyone was watching. But Graham was. Back in the cafe, Isla's hands trembled around her teacup. So this was never blind for you? He shook his head once. I recognized you the moment you sat down at that first dinner. Her breath caught. Why didn't you say anything? His answer came quietly. Because I wanted to see who you became when you didn't think anyone knew you. You were never pretending to be someone else, Isla, he said. You were just trying to find someone who wouldn't run. Her vision blurred, her chest tightened. This wasn't about the disguise. It was about the lie behind it. All this time, she thought she had control, playing the weird girl, testing boundaries, hiding behind theater. But he'd seen through it before she even sat down. You played along, she whispered, voice cracking. You knew, and you still made a bet out of me. His face darkened. No. I made a bet with you. Because it was the only way to keep you sitting at my table. She stood. This was a mistake, she said, voice flat. Well, no. Her eyes flashed. You say you wanted something real. But you engineered all of this. You manipulated the story. You let me humiliate myself while you watched. I watch you survive, he replied, rising too. Every day, with grace. You give flowers to people who can't pay, smile when your world is falling apart, and you still... Don't romanticize my struggle, she snapped. That's not love. That's cruelty dressed up as fascination. She backed away from the table. I thought you were the only man who didn't look away when I was ugly. I didn't, he said, desperate now. Then why does this feel like a trick? She walked out into the rain, no umbrella, no plan. He didn't follow. Not this time. That night she stripped off the glitter, the badge, the tiara, all of it. And for the first time since their strange game began, she cried like someone who had just been seen too clearly and hated it. If someone knows your truth before you're ready to share it, is it love or is it theft? Chapter 4. Fake Finances, Real Feelings. He asked me to lie for him, to be the woman he loved, in front of the one person he couldn't lie to. 2 days passed. No calls, no texts, no ridiculous invitations, just silence. Isla told herself it was over, that she was relieved. She threw herself into work, arranging lilies, sweeping petals, pretending like her stomach didn't twist every time someone walked through the flower shop door. But then the letter arrived. A thick white envelope pressed with gold initials, G. Inside, a single card. A note in careful black ink. Isla, I know you have every reason to be done with me, but I need to ask one last thing. My grandmother is dying. She wants to meet the woman I love. Please come, pretend, just for 1 week. I'll give you $50,000, 0 cents. But if you come, do it for her, not for me. She read it 6 times, then ripped it in half, then taped it back together. That night, Lena found her sitting on the floor of their apartment, holding the letter like it was burning her fingers. You going? No. Want to? Isla didn't answer. Lena sat beside her, rested her head on Isla's shoulder. Do it for you, not for him. Go if you need to, stay if you mean it. But don't let pride keep you from something real. Scene shift. Arrival at the estate. The house looked like it belonged in a magazine. Marble stairs, ivy-wrapped railings, light that smelled like lemon and money. Isla stepped through the front doors carrying 1 duffel bag and 50 pounds of emotional baggage. Graham met her in the entryway. No suit, no smirk. Just a quiet sweatshirt and eyes that hadn't slept in a while. You came, he said, like he didn't believe it. I'm not here for you, she said. I'm here for the woman who might believe in happy endings. He nodded. She'll want to know how we met, how we fell in love, how I proposed, and what's the official story? The truth, he said, minus the bet. Emotional shift, first glimpse of Evelyn. Evelyn Everett arrived the next morning. 82. Elegant. Smarter than both of them combined. She stepped out of the car in a tan trench coat and flats, carrying her own suitcase like a woman who didn't have time for weakness. When Graham introduced her to Isla, Evelyn didn't shake her hand. She hugged her. So, she whispered, you're the one who finally made my grandson smile like he means it. New tension, pretending isn't easy. Evelyn watched everything. How Isla poured tea, how she laughed too loudly, how Graham touched the small of her back like he wasn't sure if he was allowed to. That night at dinner, Evelyn asked, So, Isla, what do you love most about my grandson? Isla froze with a fork full of risotto halfway to her mouth. Graham leaned forward to speak. Isla beat him to it. He listens when he doesn't have to. He remembers the things you say quietly. And he makes me feel like I'm not crazy for being exactly who I am. Evelyn smiled. Good answer. Later, when they were alone on the upstairs balcony, Graham leaned against the railing beside her. You didn't have to say all that, he murmured. She stared at the city lights. I didn't make it up. If you'd asked me to pretend in front of the world, I would have said no. But you asked me to pretend in front of someone you love? And I know what that costs. In her guest room that night, Isla lay on the edge of the massive bed, staring at the ceiling like it held answers. She wasn't just pretending to love him anymore. She was starting to wonder what it would feel like to stop pretending at all. If love starts as a lie but becomes real, is it still betrayal or a second chance? Chapter 5. Her hands, his secrets. She touched his hand, and he flinched, like no one had touched it in years. On the third morning, Isla found Graham in the greenhouse. Sunlight poured through fogged glass. The scent of jasmine hung in the air like an apology. He stood at a long table, sleeves rolled, trimming back a pot of stubborn wildflowers with more gentleness than she'd ever seen in him. You garden, she said. He looked up. Only these. She stepped closer. Why? They don't survive without constant attention, he said, and they never ask for it. She stared at the flowers. Sounds familiar. He gave a faint smile. They worked side by side in silence for nearly an hour. He didn't mean to reach for his hand. It just happened. She was trying to pull a thorn from his palm, and when her fingers brushed his skin, he went still. Not cold, not tense, just still, like someone who forgot what kindness felt like. Sorry, she said quietly. He didn't let go. No one's touched me like that in a long time, he said, like it wasn't because they wanted something. Her breath caught. What do you think I want? I don't know, he whispered, and that's what scares me. Later, in the kitchen, Evelyn found them laughing over something ridiculous. Isla trying to cook toast in the oven. Graham hadn't laughed like that in years. Evelyn watched from the doorway, then left without a word. That night, Isla wandered into his office, drawn by the soft light and quiet hum of jazz playing low from the speakers. Graham didn't look up from his desk. Couldn't sleep? Nope. Your house makes weird noises. It's the pipes. It's the ghosts. He looked up then, tired, amused. Would it help if I showed you the least haunted room? She hesitated. Or you could just talk to me. The reveal, Graham's wound. He poured her tea from the pot on the sideboard, sat across from her on the leather couch. This room, he said, was my father's. She blinked. I thought he passed when you were a kid. He did. Then, soft. But he built this. Every piece. Every wall. Every rule. She waited. And the company before me. Built it from nothing, made me earn everything, even his affection. He sipped his tea. She used to say, never let someone in who doesn't have something to lose. Isla's throat tightened. And your mother? Left when I was 6, said she didn't belong in his world. He never spoke of her again. Silence. Isla whispered, and you? I stayed, I became the world. You know what scares me? He said, voice quiet. Not that you'll leave, but that you'll stay long enough to see the parts I don't know how to fix. She reached across the table and took his hand again. No thorn this time, just skin and warmth and truth. I've spent my whole life fixing things, she said, but I've never wanted to hold something broken and leave it exactly as it is. Outside, the rain returned, soft, forgiving. In that moment, neither of them was performing. They were just two tired people, sitting in the wreckage of old wounds, trying not to fall too hard. What happens when you fall in love with someone's darkness and find your own reflection staring back? Chapter 6. Almost kissed, almost real. He brushed my cheek like it meant nothing. But I didn't sleep that night. The fourth day began with laughter and ended in something quieter. Something unspoken. Graham had taken her and Evelyn to a garden party fundraiser in the hills, where people wore linen suits and passed cucumber drinks like secrets. Isla didn't fit in. And yet she did. Because every time she started to fade, Graham touched her arm, barely, gently, and the world felt tolerable again. "You're very convincing," she whispered at one point, lips near his ear. "So are you," he murmured back. She laughed. "Pretending to be your fiancé is starting to feel too easy." He looked at her then, and didn't smile. What if I wasn't pretending? They danced once, slow and off-rhythm beneath white string lights and violins that belonged in another century. He held her like he didn't know how to let go, and she let herself be held, even when it terrified her. Later that night, back at the house, she found him in the hallway outside her guest room. "Couldn't sleep?" she asked. He nodded. "Your toast ghost kept me up." She smiled, tired. He took a step closer. "Why haven't you asked about the proposal?" He blinked. "What?" He searched her face. "You never asked if I was serious about it. If I meant it when I said I'd marry you." Isla's heart stumbled. Because if I asked, I'd have to admit I wanted to hear the answer. He reached out, fingers grazing her collarbone, a touch so light it made her inhale. His hand didn't move lower, didn't demand anything. It just stayed there, resting in a question neither of them had the words to answer. Then he leaned in, and she didn't pull away. Their faces inches apart, breath soft between them. Rain tapped at the windows like a heartbeat. She closed her eyes, and just when their lips were about to meet, a knock, sharp, sudden. They jumped apart like fire had licked their skin. Evelyn's voice came through the door. "Sorry, dears, didn't mean to interrupt, but the Scotts are arriving early, noon tomorrow. The board members, the real wolves." Graham cleared his throat. "Thanks, Grandma," he said. Footsteps, silence. Isla didn't look at him. "I should go to bed." He nodded. "Good night, Isla." "Good night, Graham." Behind her closed door, she leaned against the wall, heart pounding. Not kissed, not touched, but completely changed. In his room, Graham stood staring out the window at the rain. He wanted to go back, knock, finish what he started. But if he did, he wasn't sure she'd ever trust that it wasn't all part of the performance. Is it worse to fake a kiss you didn't feel, or to walk away from the one you did? Chapter 7. The Family Test. They didn't ask about my name. They asked what I was doing in his house. They arrived in 3 black cars. Graham's family, cousins, board members, blood in suits and suspicion. Evelyn called them the wolves. Isla thought that was generous. The men wore designer watches that cost more than her rent. The women scanned her outfit like they were reading a warning label. She wore a simple blue dress, no costume, no glitter. She wanted them to see her. But let them look. Let them choke on the real her. Introductions were cold. "Isla Monroe," she said with her best florist's smile. "Where did you study?" one asked immediately. "Community college, floral design and business." Someone blinked. "Do your parents work in finance?" "My mom's a seamstress," Isla replied. "My dad passed when I was 16. They exchanged glances. Translation? Unpolished, inconvenient, unfit. Graham stood beside her like stone, calm but dangerous. When they asked about wedding dates, prenups, her intentions, He didn't say a word. Neither did she, until Patricia, Graham's aunt, finally said it out loud. "You seem sweet, dear, but this isn't a Cinderella story." Isla turned, smile gone, eyes clear. "You're right, it's not. Because Cinderella never had to explain her worth to people who never asked her name." The room fell into a breathless silence. Marcus, Graham's cousin and the company's vice chair, stepped in. "Let's not be dramatic." Graham's voice came low, sharp. "No, let's be honest." He stepped forward. "You all think I'm making a mistake, that she's here for the money, the company, the fantasy." He glanced back at Isla. "But she's the only person in this room who didn't ask me for anything, except the truth. If you can't accept her, you don't deserve to stay in my life." Patricia gasped. Marcus stood frozen. Evelyn, from her seat by the fireplace, smiled. A slow, dangerous smile. "Well," she said, sipping her tea, "that's the first time in years I've heard you sound like your grandfather." Isla stepped forward. Her voice was steady, even. "You want to know who I am? I get up at 5 to run my shop. I sell flowers to people who can't always pay. I've watched my mother skip meals to pay rent. And I have built a life, a hard, honest, beautiful one, without a single ounce of your help." She turned to Graham. "And I love your grandson. It's not because he's rich or powerful, but because he lets me be messy, real, whole." She stepped back, breathless. "So if that's not good enough for your family, I still won't apologize for it." For a second, no one spoke. Then Evelyn stood, walked over to Isla, and placed a hand on her shoulder. "You passed, Dia," she said gently. And they all failed. That night, Graham found her on the back porch, barefoot, arms wrapped around herself. "You okay?" he asked. She nodded, then turned to him with a tired smile. "You didn't have to stand up for me." "I didn't," he said. "I stood up for us." She stepped forward, reached for his hand. "So what happens now?" He looked down at their joined fingers. "Now we stop pretending. What if the greatest act of rebellion is letting someone love you anyway?" Chapter 8. The Ring That Wasn't a Lie. He got down on one knee in front of the people who doubted me most. And I almost said no, because it felt too real. The meeting ended with silence. Graham's family had left in polished cars and tight smiles, their judgment still lingering in the air like expensive perfume. But what no one expected was that Eleanor, his grandmother, had one last card to play. She called Isla into the study just before dinner. The room smelled of cedar and old books. On the desk sat a small velvet box. Eleanor placed her hand on it. "This belonged to my mother," she said, "and then to me. I was saving it for the woman who made my grandson less lonely." Isla's chest tightened. "I don't know if I'm that woman." Eleanor smiled. "You already are." That night, after the guests were gone and the fire had burned low, Graham stood in the middle of the living room. His heart was pounding, something it hadn't done for a long time. Isla walked in barefoot, hair loose, face tired, but soft. He turned to her slowly. "I know we started all of this pretending," he said. She nodded. "I know we made it a game, a bet, a test." She nodded again. "But this is the part I'm not faking." He dropped to one knee and opened the box. The ring. Vintage. Delicate. Simple, like it had already known a few lifetimes. "Isla Monroe," he said, voice unsteady. "I don't have a perfect life. I don't know how to do forever. But I know what it's like to lose myself in someone's laugh and find home in the way they look at me when I'm not trying to be impressive." He took a breath. "Will you marry me? Not because we made a deal, but because we made something real?" She didn't move for a second, just stood there, shaking, breath shallow. Then, slowly, painfully, she whispered, "You're not allowed to say things like that." He blinked. "Why?" "Because I'll believe you." She dropped to her knees with him, face to face, soul to soul, and took the ring herself, slid it on, trembling. "I don't want a perfect life either," she whispered. "I just want this. You, me, messy, honest, real. Then she kissed him. Not like a fairy tale, but like someone finally choosing to stay. She put the ring on before saying yes, because her heart had already answered. They stayed there, kneeling, hands tangled together like vines around something too fragile to name. The fireplace flickered. Somewhere, rain began to fall again, but inside, they'd found warmth. Later that night, Isla curled into Graham's side, wearing his hoodie and nothing else. He looked down at her, touched her hair gently. "You still think this isn't your world?" She smiled, eyes closed. "I think maybe I'm not just visiting anymore. What if love doesn't rescue you, but reminds you you were never lost to begin with?" Chapter 9. No one pretends this well. They all smiled like they believed it. But I kept wondering, what if I was still just pretending to belong? The engagement made headlines. Literally, Seattle's coldest CEO melts for mystery girl. From street florist to Mrs. Everett, inside the Cinderella story. Isla Monroe, the girl who changed a Titan's heart. Everyone wanted a piece of her. Her shop, her past, her love story. But no one asked what it felt like to wake up next to a man who used to terrify you, and now made you feel safer than your own heartbeat. Eleanor hosted a formal engagement dinner. Elegant, polished, terrifying. Isla wore a black dress Graham had custom made, but she still couldn't stop tugging at the seams. Beside her, the women smiled too tightly. The men nodded politely. The air buzzed with quiet doubt. "How'd you really meet?" one whispered with a smirk. "What do you talk about?" asked another, not even hiding her skepticism. Isla smiled, said all the right things. But inside, something curled and shook. What if they were right? What if she wasn't enough? She found Graham outside after dessert, alone on the balcony. The city glimmered beneath them. He was quiet, glass in hand, staring into the skyline. "You left me in there," she teased, trying to sound light. He didn't smile. Instead, he turned to her, all calm and quiet and heartbreak in a suit. "Do you want to call it off?" The words hit like cold air. "What?" "You're uncomfortable," he said. "You're fading. I can see it." "I'm fine." "You're not." Silence. "Then, I don't belong in your world." Graham stepped closer. "Then I'll leave it." "What?" "We'll build a new one. Just us. No boardrooms, no titles." Isla's voice trembled. "But what if I break it?" He looked at her like she was the most sacred thing he'd ever seen. "Then I'll help you build it again. You can fall apart," he said, "and I'll still stay. Because no one pretends this well, Isla. Not even you." She broke then, not into tears, into truth. She told him about the flower shop, about the eviction notice she hadn't opened yet, about the part of her that still thought love was earned through sacrifice. "I don't know how to need someone," she whispered. "Needing makes me weak." He touched her cheek, gently. "Needing makes you human." That night they didn't make love. They held each other. She cried into his chest, while he whispered stories he'd never told. About his mother. About the night he decided power was safer than vulnerability. About the day he saw her, outside a flower cart, and couldn't look away. What if the real test of love isn't staying strong, but letting someone see you when you're not? Chapter 10. Something borrowed, something brave. I never imagined walking down the aisle would feel like coming home. But that's what love does. It makes strangers feel like family. They didn't wait long. 1 week after the engagement dinner, they stood in a garden behind Eleanor's house. No red carpet, no cameras, no designer gowns. Just wildflowers, wooden chairs, and people who finally understood what this was. Isla's dress wasn't new. It was borrowed from Eleanor's trunk, worn 50 years earlier. A simple ivory gown with lace along the cuffs and a small rip near the hem. Perfect. She wore her mother's earrings, her sister's courage, her own heart. Graham stood at the altar in a navy suit. No tie, no armor. Just eyes full of light and hands that looked steady but weren't. Lena whispered as she adjusted Isla's veil. "This is the first time I've seen you look soft. Is that a good thing?" "It's the best thing." As Isla walked down the aisle, she didn't hear music. She heard memories. The crunch of gravel under her boots that first night. The sharp laugh he gave when she said passion fruit should explode. The sound of him whispering her name like it was sacred. She looked up and saw him crying. And suddenly, she wasn't scared anymore. I came into your life trying to be forgettable. But you made me unforgettable. I wore disguises to survive. And you still saw me. Not because I was perfect, but because I was real with you. So today, I don't promise forever. I promise today. And I'll keep choosing today again and again. You undid me. In the most gentle, necessary way. I built walls and you climbed them barefoot, handing out flowers at every turn. I used to think love was a risk I couldn't afford. Now I know the only thing I can't afford is losing you. So I promise to be your soft place, your partner, and the hand that never lets go. They said I do with shaking hands and steady hearts. Eleanor clapped the loudest. The first kiss was short, stunned, holy. The second kiss was laughter and tears. At the reception, they served pastries from Isla's flower shop counter, brigadeiros, and lemon bars with little flags that said, "We almost didn't." No ballroom. Just long tables, handwritten place cards, and jazz on vinyl. Marcus, Graham's cousin, stood to give a toast. "We judged her too quickly," he said, "and we almost lost the best thing that's happened to this family." Even Patricia smiled. Just a little. That night, as the guests left and the sky turned soft, Graham found Isla barefoot in the kitchen eating leftover cake with a spoon. "You married a mess," she told him. "I married a masterpiece," he replied. "I thought I needed to be rescued," she whispered. "But I just needed someone who wouldn't flinch when I showed up real." They curled into bed, still dressed, her feet cold against his leg. The house quiet, the world soft. "I used to think love had to hurt," she murmured. "And now?" he asked. "Now I think it just has to be brave. What if happily ever after isn't perfect? What if it's just two people choosing to stay, every day? Even when it's hard." Love was never the lie. Sometimes the stories that begin as lies end up telling us the truth. Isla never planned to fall in love. She planned to protect herself. To hide behind messiness and mischief and layers of thrift store armor. And Graham, he thought control was safer than vulnerability, that building an empire could protect him from loneliness. But then came the mess. The accident of meeting someone who wasn't impressed by your power, but by your quiet. Someone who didn't ask for your world, but handed you theirs. Because real love doesn't arrive with flowers and fireworks. It walks in quietly and says, "I see you, even here." Graham gave Isla space to be soft. Isla gave Graham permission to stop performing. They gave each other the only thing that ever mattered. The truth of being fully dangerously human. So, if you've ever felt too ordinary to be chosen, if you've ever dressed down your heart because you were afraid it wouldn't be enough, if you've ever wondered whether anyone could love you exactly as you are, this story is for you. Not because it's perfect, but because it reminds us love was never the lie. Priding was. If this story touched something in you, the next one goes even deeper. Come sit with us again. We'll leave the light on,